Brown says, get that India. Big boy.
Call an ambulance! Maybe call a police! Oh, what a shot! What a shot! Campbell killer!
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Tip Sheet Podcast. As always, I'm your host John, also known as 4020. No one joining me today. Unfortunately, 60s has a prior important engagement, so it's me flying solo for the preview podcast. So we're going to power through the two previews this week. No Jersey Flag and no New South Wales Cup, meaning there's only NRLW and NRL games to preview. But before we jump into those games, a quick shout out to the sponsors of the show, Big Swing Golf North Mead and Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan and Parramatta. You guys know how important they are to the making of the tip sheet. So let's get right into it, starting with the NRLW as the Parramatta Eels in 10th place take on the 6th place Brisbane Broncos. But don't let those ladder seedings fool you. Brisbane are in some imperious touch after a couple of very convincing wins, including an absolute evisceration of the North Queensland Cowboys last week, I think along the tunes of 40-10 or thereabouts. The Eels go up to Totally Workwear Stadium, so it's one of the smaller venues in Brisbane. This one is kicking off at 3:10 p.m. on Saturday the 12th of August. Quick look at this Brisbane Broncos lineup. Plenty of star power in there. You got Haley Maddock at fullback, Lauren Dam and Ashley Werner on the wings. The fearsome Mele Hafanga is in the centres alongside Sinead Chisolka. In the halves, former Parramatta Eel Gal Broughton will partner the captain Ali Brigginshaw. In the front row at prop forwards, we've got a Brianna and a Brianna. So Brianna Eels with an E and Brianna Clark with an I. They're the two prop forwards. Lavinia Gould is the dummy half. Back row, Tasman Gray, Romy Teitzel, a couple of very well-known names there. Maria Denman is a lock forward on the interchange. Jada Ferguson, Philomena Hanisi, another former Parramatta Eel there. Chelsea Lenarduzzi and Jasmine Fogavini, a couple of strong Italian surnames there. Always appreciate seeing that in the NRL or NRLW. Extended roster, Tony Hunt, Grace Griffin, Keisha Lee Coolwell. And it's a short reserve lineup for the Broncos here, for only 3 players on their extended roster. Looking at the Parramatta Eels now, they've got a couple of changes this week, a couple of big ones coming in, but unfortunately also the loss of Kennedy Cherrington, who did lose her, or I wouldn't say she appealed, she went direct to the judiciary and copped the 4-week suspension on the chin. So let's start at fullback, Abby Church. She is in the number 1. On the wings, you've got Zoe Fay on the left edge and Monique Donovan on the right. In the centres, Kimberly Hunt gets her official number 3 or first official number 3 on the back after coming into the team late last week. She will partner Cassie Tohihiku as the other centre. In the halves, Pahuka Berryman Duff retains her number 6 spot. She's working alongside new marquee recruit, and our first-time Parramatta Eel in terms of proper games, Rachael Pearson, who will captain the team. So big in there for the Parramatta Eels. In the front row, Talisha O'Neill works alongside another marquee recruit, Elsie Albert, finally fit. Both Pearson and Albert have overcome calf injuries that have kept them out for the first 3 weeks of the competition. Ruben Cherrington will be at dummy half. Amelia Murphy, Mahalia Murphy on the edges. Kennedy Cherrington named at lock forward. We're still waiting to see what her official replacement is, but I imagine that it would involve Talisha O'Neill or someone similar moving to lock forward and another prop like Maddie Jones coming into the starting team. But speaking of the interchange, Capri Paikau is the utility dummy half at number 14. Madeline Jones, Shannon Muru and Kyra Simon round out the reserve interchanges. But the extended roster features Tyler Amiatu, Tanika Toddhunter, Ruby Jean Kennard-Ellis, Chloe Jackson and Lindsay Tui, one of whom will come into the team. Presumably probably Ruby Jean Kennard-Ellis, but then probably have some other options there too. Could go Tyler Amiatu, depending on how they want to shape that middle rotation. Officials for the game, Belinda Sharp is the senior review official, but no one else has been posted with the main whistle or on the sidelines, so obviously trying to juggle that roster across the weekend and figure out who's available. Yeah, well, the Eels, they're out of home games. We've spoken about this on the podcast prior. They're on the road for the remainder of the NRLW season. Even with 2 home games credited to their name to come, they're at Cogra and Canberra, so they're not going to gain any benefit in terms of home field advantage there. So they've got to do it the tough way on the road. And they're taking on the Brisbane Broncos, who did start 0-2, but rounded that corner fiercely last week when they, as I said, eviscerated the Cowboys. Yeah, it is tough to spin this in a positive light for the Parramatta Eels. They're travelling across the border, taking on one of the premiership contenders that look to have roared back to life. They did show some good signs against Newcastle. Like I said, in spite of that scoreboard, I thought they battled fiercely. Looked a lot more intent in defence, a lot more energetic. Just couldn't quite capitalise on some early opportunities, and Newcastle got a good run of possession. Went down a player in the second half when Kennedy got sent off. And, yeah, it sort of spiralled from there. But this is a game where the fundamentals need to be reinforced, once again. That forward pack needs to find a footing in the ruck. Elsie Albert has to lead the way in the absence of Kennedy Cherrington, but she will need support. Talisha O'Neill needs to come with her. She's going to need the interchange forwards like Jones, Simon and Muru, as well as whoever comes in for Kennedy to go with her and battle against a very, very good Brisbane forward pack in order to give their outside backs and halves a chance. And speaking of those backs and halves, Rachael Pearson making her club debut, she has to be instrumental in this one. Her kicking game is going to need to be really precise, both clearing and attacking. She's going to need to organise both sides of the field and give them opportunities to attack with the ball in hand. And probably the other thing that we shouldn't be sleeping on too is that if all that stuff comes together and the Eels can get traction in the ruck and they can create opportunities out wide and capitalise on them, one thing they've really let themselves down in the first few weeks is converting those tries. And while I know that the scoreboard has blown out to a point where those conversions wouldn't necessarily make a difference in the big picture, in the context of the flow of the game, having those extra 2 points can, mean a lot in terms of scoreboard pressure and just creating other opportunities. And Rachael Pearson's going to come back in, and I imagine she's going to take over the kicking duties and hopefully do a fairly neat job of converting those opportunities. And yeah, and that's reality is that with the ball in hand and what they can control, the Parramatta Eels just need to keep tuning up what they've been doing across the last few weeks. Obviously, it started pretty ordinary against the West Tigers and the Dragons, but I do think they made some steps last week against Newcastle, but they can't let that sit there. They need to make another big stride or two if they're going to be competitive with the Brisbane Broncos, because when you look at that team, goodness, they've just got strike across the park. Haley Maddock is a very good fullback. Gal Broughton is a real live wire in the halves now. She's done a fantastic job for Brisbane and looked real dangerous last week. Ali Brigginshaw is, not just a representative halfback, but one of the best players in the NRLW. And so you should look at that spine right there. They've got three very, very dangerous players, and that's before we even consider their new recruit, Mele Hafanga, who ran riot last week against the Cowboys. And that's going to be a tough assignment for Cassie Toehiku, who I believe will be marking up against her. But Cassie's a good young player in her own right, and this will be a great challenge for her. And, you always look for those big matchups in the centres. It's part of the reason why we enjoy rugby league. And if the Eels can put a bottle on all those sort of players as well as compete in the ruck, it's going to put them in a chance to be competitive, rather. The question is, can it all come together? And like I said, it is hard to be super optimistic about their outlook right now, given what we've seen in the first three rounds relative to the rest of the NRLW. But if they're going to make some noise this season, if they're going to, not necessarily just have a shake at the title and a big run to the finals, but do themselves the sort of service that they should be doing. Because there is talent in this team. They just need to bring it out and be competitive. It starts this week. They've got to find a way to upset the strong favourites here in the Brisbane Broncos. And I think that in order to do that, obviously they need to work as a team. But I think that Rachael Pearson and Elsie Albert are going to have a lot to do with the winning formula. Pearson's ability to steer the team around the park, get them through tough sets and find clearing kicks, as well as be instrumental in organising that attack in the red zone and capitalising on attacking opportunities, as well as Elsie Albert's just sheer toughness and work rate and impact through the middle. And it's such a shame that we're not going to see her working alongside Kennedy for at least another month. Obviously, Kennedy, for that 4-week ban, means she's not back until round 8 with just 2 games to play left in the competition. So that's obviously a huge setback, not just for Kennedy, but for the team. I think the entire forward pack was really built around having Kennedy and Albert there to lead this roster. And it puts a lot of pressure on Elsie, obviously, to come in from that calf injury and be the flag bearer, the one charging straight into the breach every run, every game. But that's why she was recruited. And I really look forward to seeing what sort of impact both her and Pearson can make on Saturday. And yeah, I suppose in terms of a tip, I'm going to back our girls. I know that realistically they are the outsiders in this one, but I am very keen to see what Pearson and Albert can do to sort of turn the tide here. I think that Albert's going to be big in terms of production. She's going to be working for In a 70-minute contest, I wouldn't be surprised if she's getting well over 50 minutes of play time, if not going close to the distance. While Pearson, I think, is just going to be involved in everything that is going to be good about Parramatta's attack. So if they're going to win, it's going to be tough. I will tip them to do it about probably relatively high scoring, maybe 28-24. I think that the best on field will be Rachael Pearson, first try scorer. It is. I do like that backline for the Parramatta Eels. I really do like the trio of Church, Faye and Toi Hiku based on what we've seen so far this season. I thought Hunt made a pretty strong club debut against Newcastle. Didn't look out of place. I will go for Zawi Faye, though, who looks like a natural down that left edge. And I think with Pearson coming back into the team, there might be a nice little crossfield kick opportunity. And Zawi showing that she can climb the ladder and be really aggressive in attacking that football. So maybe that's where the first points will come for the Parramatta Eels. And now we turn our eyes to the only other fixture on the weekend, which is the kickoff on Friday night for the Brisbane Broncos and the Parramatta Eels in the NRL. This one taking place 8 o'clock p.m. at the Gabba. Suncorp Stadium being out of commission as one of the stadiums being used for the Women's FIFA World Cup, where the Matildas are doing fantastic, so good luck to them. Oh, yeah, it's a big one, boys. This is a very, very big one, a season-defining game for the Parramatta Eels. They managed to eke out a win against St. George and keep their hopes alive, but they're going to need so much more taking on the second-place Brisbane Broncos, this week, a team that is in very, very good form. Strong across the park, electric back line, really strong spine, dominant forward pack, good interchange. One of the, obviously their finals credentials are still yet to be confirmed in terms of how they can challenge, especially Penrith, but other contenders in sudden death football. But there is no doubt that this is one of the most fearsome teams on paper, and they've played that way throughout the majority of this season, and now find themselves nipping at the heels of the Panthers for the minor premiership. That really puts the situation into perspective for the Parramatta Eels. This is a big task this week, and the fact they've got to do it on the road makes it all that much more difficult. But hey, no one said it was ever going to be easy, and the Parramatta Eels put themselves in this position with games that they dropped earlier this season that were very winnable, and games they dropped recently that were also very winnable. So they now do it the hard way, and it means winning through the Broncos, the Roosters, and the Panthers. Some combination of 2 or 3 wins in those games, and they will find themselves right in the mix of finals football. But they take on a Brisbane Broncos outfit that, we're so used to saying this, has got some big boosts this week. After battling for a number of weeks without Adam Reynolds, guess who's back this week? Yep, their commander-in-chief, their marshal, their halfback is back. He takes his place at halfback. Reece Walsh, who was also under a question mark earlier this week, has been cleared fit to play. Dean Mariner and Selwyn Cobb are on the wings. Katoni Staggs and Herbie Farnworth in the centres. That is an outstanding back line. I mean, Dean Mariner's not their first choice winger, and he is still a very good player, very good young player there. And yeah, 1 to 5, one of the most exciting fullbacks in the competition, and a pair of centres that are just outstanding. In the halves, Ezra Mam, who was a very good young 5'8" in his own right, will partner the senior statesman of Adam Reynolds. It's a very good combination. Obviously, Reynolds being the field marshal, the organiser, Mam being the sort of lightning in a bottle player. In the front row, you got Thomas Flegler and Payne Haas. Billy Walters is the dummy half. Kurt Capewell, Jordan Ricky, and Patrick Carrigan in the back row. We mentioned earlier this week about the importance of being able to battle that middle. Flegler, Haas, and Carrigan. It is as good a front row and lock triumvirate that you're going to see in the NRL. The Eels at full strength obviously have a pretty good one themselves, but they're not there this week with no Reagan Campbell-Gillard, meaning that the rest of the team's got to pick up the slack and battle fiercely in the middle. On the interchange, you got Tyson Smoothy, Brendan Piakura, and Kobe Harrington alongside Keenan Palacia. Extended roster: Corey Jensen, Xavier Wilson, Tristan Saylor, Jock Madden, and Jordan Pereira. That Broncos bench, not to be slept on. Piakura, after struggling earlier in his NRL career, has really found his stride this year. Kobe Harrington's a very, very solid interchange player. Keenan Palacia likewise, and Tyson Smoothy a handy utility. For the Eels, they've got a couple of changes this week. Brad Arthur's been tinkering with that left edge, trying to find a solution in the absence of Micah Sevo and Sean Lane. But at fullback, no doubts there. Captain Clinton Gufferson will take over as usual. Bailey Simonson moves from centre to the wing this week on the left edge as Brad Arthur, like I said, sort of spot worlds and tinkers and adjusts, trying to find anything they can hold out this week. He'll be joined on the left edge by Dejan Arce at centre. Right edge, as always, Will Penasini and Sean Russell. Dylan Brown and Mitchell Moses are in the halves. In the front row, Joe Offengai gets another start with Reagan Campbell-Gillard due back next week. Junior Barlaw will be his running mate in the front row. Joey Lussick at dummy half. Andrew Davey comes back into the starting team after starting from the bench last week. He'll be on the left edge as Ryan Madison shifts back to his specialist interchange role. Bryce Cartwright on the right. Jermaine Hopgood at lock forward. On the interchange, Luca Moretti, Ryan Madison, Woodrow McGregor, and Brendan Hands, who has been recalled after a one-game stint at New South Wales Cup level, where he had an excellent outing playing at 5'8", actually, so showing that utility value. On the extended roster for the Eels, Makahesi Makatoa, Wanga Blake, Offa Hickey Ogden, Kai Rodwell, and Jack Murchie. The officials in this one, Adam G with the main whistle, Wyatt Raymond and Belinda Sharp running the lines. Gerard Sutton is in the box. And yeah, with all that laid out, the Eels need to find a way to victory. And like the last few weeks, it feels like the first thing you're talking about is finding a way to mitigate the damage that can be done to our left edge. And it's really frustrating to have to start any sort of analysis or preview that way, because it is such an obvious weakness for any opposition, but especially a team like the Broncos. They're going to have the likes of Reynolds and Walsh and Cobbo and Katoni Staggs down that right edge running at another makeshift sort of structure. That's not a slight on BA. He's obviously just trying to do what he can with what he has. But right now, we've sort of got holes at wing with Mike Acevo being unavailable due to suspension and not having a really strong reserve winger below him. And even at left edge, I mean, I know no Sean Lane and no Matt Dury, one with a busted elbow and one with a syndesmosis injury from reserve grade. But we do feel a bit fit on the edges too. Andrew Davey does a solid job, but we're certainly lacking for a class back rower right now, further which has been weakened by the fact that we really do need to line Ryan Madison up in the ruck to compete with the Broncos this week by virtue of having no Reagan Campbell-Gillard. You know, even if Reg was there, you'd be considering playing Maddo through the middle just to compete with that outstanding Broncos ruck. But without Reg, it's a obviously no-brainer. You cannot flex Madison to the left edge and look for him to shore up that side of the field alongside Dylan Brown. So it leaves a pretty obvious target for the Broncos to attack down the side that they do love attacking down in general. Can the Parramatta Eels do it? Again, this is a function of both attitude and preparation. Bailey Simonson's been quite good in the centres. He hasn't been terrible at wing, but I think he is a much better centre than a winger. Dejan Arce has done a courageous job for the Parramatta Eels, filling in for Dylan Brown for that suspension. Had a couple of really strong games at 5'8", but then struggled defensively in that position. And that does have me a little bit concerned. 5'8" is a position that you can protect a little bit better than centre. I think that centre, in terms of the technical degree of difficulty, is probably the hardest position in the back line to defend. You're often on an island or the one making the important 2-on-2 call out wide, whether it's a jam or hold or any other variation of those defensive patterns. And he's going up against Staggs, who, you know, is a physical phenom himself. He loves to break tackles, use the ability to jink and get on the outside off the left foot there and create that the overlap, or the opportunity for an overlap, 2-on-1. So Dejan's going to need to be real sharp in this one, real sharp mustard. And I'm not going to say he can't do it, but he's going to need to be really, really dialed in. He's going to have the game of his season, the game of his career even, taking on a rep caliber player like Staggs in such a high leverage match. But I'm going to back him to give it his all, and hopefully that left edge can stimulate the bleeding, because the Broncos, as much as I complain about the defensive integrity of our left edge, the reality is the Broncos have an outstanding right edge of their own. They're going to get this. They're going to score points. They've scored points against every team in the competition with that right edge. So it's about mitigating that damage and not spotting them easy opportunities to attack. So if we can do that, that immediately puts us in a much better place. And then we turn to, as always, our core players. And we're going to need big games from Moses, Brown, Gufferson, that rotation of dummy halves between Lussick and Hands. Junior, who actually I think has picked up his game in recent weeks. I know that the Eels had a big loss against Melbourne and then a sort of sneak home against the Dragons. But I think Junior's really picked up the slack in the last couple of weeks about Reg. And, it is worth reminding that it has been a long 2 years for Junior. He has shouldered an immense workload and had almost no time off for the big man. And when you're playing prop forward at that sort of size and that sort of condition, it takes a load in the body. So if he can just haul himself to the finish line for us it would be absolutely immense. But I think that, Junes is going to have to lead the way here. Joe needs to do a really solid job alongside him. Just keep that work. Joe's had some good moments, but I want him to keep that involvement in there. And it's easy to fade out of games when you got a lot of other mouths to feed, but he just needs to keep getting involved and just keep hammering through the middle in attack and defence. And then you look at your other forwards, and Cartwright and Hopgood really stand out for their ability to generate second phase play. And this is always the balance for them, isn't it? Going up against a Broncos pack that's going to be really aggressive in defence. If they can get quality second phase ball, it's going to create incredible attacking opportunities and really challenge that front line of defence. But the same side, or on the other side rather, bad offloads will pile pressure onto the Parramatta Eels, cheap turnovers, flipping field position when you're trying to get out of your own half or just over halfway, and the Broncos will swarm and they'll feed on that. So I think for Cartwright and Hopgood, they're going to be big players in this one. If they can, generate the ground meters and challenge the defensive line as runners and build from there with the offloads, they're going to be important. We know that Moses loves to play with Cartwright down that right edge. He uses him a lot on those short balls. I do want to see him use Will Penasini a bit more too, after he's established Bryce as a credible threat running the ball off those short lines. And Bryce has done that fantastically this year. But I would love to see Penasini get his chance to attack Herbie Farnworth, who was another fantastic centre in the NRL. But outside of all the obvious stuff and, controlling the ruck, kicking well and all the sort of rugby league 101s that we always talk about on the show because they are so important to winning in a given game. If the Eels get a bit of ascendancy in this one, if they get their noses ahead in the contest, I just don't want to see him start getting reckless, which is what we saw against the Dragons, obviously, most recently, but a couple other times this season where a strong start has sort of been undermined by getting a bit loose with those opportunities or looking for those opportunities to play expansive instead of just, really putting the foot to the throat and letting Mitchell Moses just grind them to dust with that kicking game. So if they do get ahead of the Broncos here, and I know for a lot of people that's a big if, given the relative standings of the two teams at the moment, but there is I think there is a credible chance that the Parramatta Eels can start hot and score a try or two. I want to see him, put the axe to the grindstone here and just sharpen that edge. Just really work these Broncos into the ground, because if you give them the sniff, they will find a way to score. Reece Walsh can create something from nothing. That spine is so good. And even Billy Walters, he loves to run the ball and he can catch out some sloppy marker defense, which the Eels can be guilty of in 2023. So as a team, obviously they need to work together as individual, as their respective playing units, backs, forwards, spine, interchange. You need to see real energy across the park. And I'm not sure if the any sort of tape reveals a particular player you want to be attacking in the Broncos composition. Obviously, halves always jump out as easier defensive targets to pick on. They tend to be smaller. Players like Reynolds carry injuries, so they're not always 100%. So they're always, targets to attack. But I don't know if there's any other player in this Broncos team you can really go after, because it is such a well-balanced roster. That back line, like I said, is big, fast, strong. In the forwards, they've got, representative middles and Flegler, Haas and Carrigan. Former rep player in Capewell and Jordan Ricky, who's a good young back rower. Ricky, in the past, I think, has been a player you could target defensively. He was in prior Eels-Broncos clashes to 2023. I feel like he was a player we could sort of go after and get, 4, 5, 6 missed tackles out of. He's been much improved in that regard defensively in 2023, so I don't know if you want to go back to that well. And as I check his stats, he's over 92%, 92.1% effective tackle rate this season, which is, I think, a much improved rate for him and maybe a career high watermark. So you can look to exploit that and maybe tap into something there, but you're going in there knowing that he has made strides in that part of his game. And even on the interchange, where the Eels sometimes have a good advantage over their opposition, Piakura, Hevington and Palacia, three really robust interchange forwards that let the Broncos keep their tempo when they go through rotations. Moretti, Madison, Greg, they're not exactly chumps themselves. I just mentioned that we match up pretty well on the bench to most teams, but they're going to have their work cut out for them. They're not going to take over the game easily in that second and third rotation, but they will be key to keeping the Eels in this contest. And I mentioned earlier that, with this game alongside the Roosters and the Panthers in the run home with a final round bye, the Eels really need to have 2, and ideally 3, but realistically 2 of these upcoming 3 games in the bag. And I think this one, in many ways, is the most important because you get Mike Acevo and Reagan Campbell-Gillard back next week, which means you get that boost then. So getting this one now, if you can beat the Broncos on Friday night at the Gabba, if you can steal this win, you've put yourself in such an advantageous position. You're giving yourself so much momentum, such an opportunity to springboard up that ladder. And you suddenly stop talking about, oh, can we make the finals, to how far up the top 8 can you climb? And right now the Eels sit in 9th place, equal with the Rabbitohs on points. 1 point behind the Knights, who had that draw, obviously, but a win behind the Sharks, 2 wins behind the Storm and the Raiders. So the top 4 is probably out of your reach at this point. But can you jag 5th? There's a reasonable case to say you can get up as high as 6. That gets you a week 1 home final. And these are important things when it comes to the NRL postseason. So getting this win this week is absolutely critical on so many fronts for this season. You know, not just for keeping ourselves in contention for the finals, but for the momentum that it builds, for the bonus of getting those 2 core players back next week and be able to leap from there. So they've got to find a way to get it done in my book. And despite all our issues, despite our struggles in recent weeks, despite the fact that we are nowhere near full strength, we've got a representative prop out, we've got a very good winger out, we've got a representative caliber back row out. We are struggling in that regard, and we've struggled in that regard all season. Injuries and suspensions have been, alongside some other factors, both controllable and uncontrollable, have been such a huge influence on the shape of our season. I still think they've got the cattle that can get this one done. When push comes to shove, they've got an outstanding spine: Gufferson, Brown, Moses, a couple of really handy, pardon the pun, dummy halves and Lussick and hands there, alongside striking the back line with Will Penasini in particular, and then some good forwards like Junior, Hopgood, Cartwright, Madison, Wirra McGregor, if he can get back to his best in the coming games. This is a roster that, for all our issues, all our complaints, can still hang with the big boys. And they've got to find that way. They've got to find it in themselves this week to do exactly that, to hang with the Broncos and to just, wear them down. And Brisbane, they've been one of the real benchmarks of this competition. They got the Eels and Darwin they met earlier this year. But even in that game, it took a terrible first half in Parramatta to really set the Broncos up for victory, and the Eels nearly ran them down. And that's been a fixture of this season, is that the Eels have been able to run down almost anyone. And that is both a positive and a negative, because they're putting themselves in positions where they have to dig themselves out of a hole, as we saw with the Dragons last week. But it also shows that this roster still can hang with anybody. So start strong. Don't make that lapse that we've seen in other games this season. And take the axe to the grindstone, put the foot to the throat. Really flex your premiership credentials this week. And that's going to be on the entire team. It's going to be on the forwards to win the middle or compete fiercely in the middle. It's going to be on the spine to control the game, the kicking game of Mitchell Moses, the composure of Dylan Brown, the relentless competitive drive of Quinton Gufferson to be there, to be on hand to save the try at the last line of defense and chase every ball. So all those guys need to come together, play their best football, and I think the Eels can do it. So let's get to my predictions. I'm going to back the Eels to win this one. The scoreline, this one could be wild, because we know the Broncos could put on a score if they get their chances. The Eels could win tight, as we've seen for chunks of the season. The Eels could also put on a bit of a score here. I don't think that's going to be the outcome, but it is worth sort of breathing air to, that this Eels team can pile on points, and if they get things right, they could absolutely test the Broncos. But I will go for a Parramatta Eels win. I'm going to go for, despite most of our games being fairly high scoring, I'll go for a more narrow margin here. Parramatta Eels 20 to the Brisbane Broncos 18. So it'll be a nail biter. First try scorer for the Blue and Gold, I will go. Well, I keep talking about him, but I will go Will Penasini. I think if the Eels are to win this, they should be spotlighting their outstanding right centre. So I will go for Will to get the opportunity to score the first try. And then best on field, again, if we are to do this one, you're going to need a whole swathe of people to step up and really do a great job. And it's always easy to go to the spine: Gufferson, Brown, Moses. So I'll look elsewhere, sort of noting that I expect them to all have outstanding games. Outside of the 1, 6, and 7, the player I feel like can have the most influence in this game is probably Jermaine Hopgood. I mentioned him and Cardi and their ability to generate offloads. I feel like Defensively, Hopgood's got a massive assignment going up against Pat Carrigan and obviously Haas and Fleckler as well. But I think that, he's going to be pivotal to this one. We're going to need him to defend strongly, to run strongly, and be that fulcrum in attack to generate some unique attacking opportunities. So, got the Eels to win. Penasini first try scorer, Jermaine Hopgood best on field. And, 60s, unfortunately, like I said, could not be here today. There was an important personal matter he was attending. And he will be back for the Instant Reaction podcast tomorrow night, alongside all the podcasts moving forward. So hopefully you enjoyed me rambling on by myself for a bit over half an hour. Hopefully it wasn't too rough on the ears. And as always, we'll give a farewell shout out to the sponsors of the show, Big Swing Golf, Northmead, and Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, NRL and Parramatta. And I can't quite do it with the gusto of the big fella, but I will sign off with a go you good things, go you mighty Parramatta Eels.